Welcome back to Why Blank Lost. I'm David Bloomberg. It has been another dizzying week on Big Brother 25. Joining me on this wild ride is, of course, my co-host, Ovi Kabir.
Hey, David, always happy to be here. A roller coaster of a season. Week one didn't disappoint. Well, disappointed in some ways, but it was still
Well,
crazy. And this week itself carried on that train.
yes, it was pointed out to me on Twitter by a Survivor player that Wednesday was National Roller Coaster Day. But inside the Big Brother house, they got their days messed up because Tuesday was filled with the twists and turns and loop-the-loops.
Up and down, up and down.
Yeah. And if that roller coaster had stopped on Tuesday, I would have been right in my eviction prediction. Instead, I was only correct about who would be nominated, but darn it, that's just not good enough.
Yeah, no, somehow your winner pick keeps escaping by the fringe of his clothes.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see if that continues when we get to our predictions later. I still don't think he's going to win. Let's be honest here. But I was going to say stranger things have happened, but I'm not sure they have.
I think it's impressive that both you and I were high on the one person that I think universally everyone's like, I actually really like the rest of this cast, except this person.
Yeah. Yeah, there was someone laughing at us in the YouTube comments about that. Imagine fighting over Cameron. Yeah, we didn't know. I'm sorry.
It's understandable. This is Bring the Collins on. We were fighting over him, and we saw what happened now.
So, Ovi, you and I have this scheduled time, right? Mm-hmm. So I want to emphasize that I am here for honor, honesty, integrity, and loyalty. Right?
Yes.
And I know, or I want to know, who are your allies, right? What is your mid-game plan, right? Where do you see yourself in 5 years, right? What is your social security number, right?
The Oscar nominee right there. That nominee, you deserve the nomination for that.
Yes, for anyone who perhaps doesn't watch the live feeds, and maybe you're new to the podcast. I don't normally grill Ovi like that. But people who saw Hisam on the live feeds know he bluntly questioned everyone in the house like he was doing some sort of police interrogation. We saw a little of it on the show, but not nearly enough. More of what we saw on the show, and I debated which way to go here, was him asking questions and then answering answering himself. So maybe I'll do that in the rules. I'll be like, Ovi, did he scheme and plot? Well, yes, he did, and then I'll just, or she in this case. But
you got to do the answer and the question at the same time.
Yes.
It's just run through it. I'm just here to listen.
Yeah. I'll wait till you open your mouth.
Yeah.
As if to answer, and then I'll jump in.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. But much like we saw him do, we do both ask and answer questions. Specifically, how the player who was evicted each week did in their game compared to a set of guiding rules I originally wrote in 2004 and have modified ever since. We analyze them using what we saw on TV, live feeds, interviews, and other information that isn't some sort of future spoiler. The most recent version, of course, can be found at robhasawebsite.com/bigbrotherrules. But before we get to the rules, we usually have some other things to discuss about the week in general. And of course, I already started that in bringing up just a small snapshot of how Hisam was acting. He's just been so egotistical, so self-righteous that it's like he's playing a caricature of himself. I mean, he's not. That's the thing. But that's just how ridiculous his behavior has been. If we saw this character on a scripted show, we'd all be like, oh, come on, nobody acts like that. That's just not a believable character. I mean, a lot of it was aimed at Reilly as he talked about, well, I love her. I love you, Reilly, but I have to teach you a lesson. Like it's her dad. I mean, we thought Cameron was acting weird as her dad, but then Hisam went and amped it up. And a lot of it was also directed at other players, which led to that temporary revolt on Tuesday.
I think going off of what you're saying, that this episode is why Reilly lost, but you will find us talking about how Hisam won essentially this week because the way he did act. And that's what I love about this podcast. It makes it unique, I think, compared to other ones where we do a deep dive of strategy and game theory on each player. And Hisam this week was a really interesting player because when we talk about HOH-itis, when you win HOH, head of household, and go straight to your head, Hisam was a perfect example of this. But I'm going to say this first because I always love arguing with David on these episodes, and I'm going to put this out there first because I feel like I'm going to argue with a lot of people on this. I love the train wreck we saw of Hisam this week in the sense of there were some parts where, it is here and there, but I just felt like this was old school Big Brother where in your face, telling you I'm coming at you. And we're going to talk about this probably during the veto when we recap that part. But he basically saying who his target is. This is why I want you out. And also, this is why I shouldn't say I want you out. But I'm going to say this. I'm going to plan my next 3 weeks and 5 weeks ahead with everyone around. I just love this level of this character. These are the type of quote unquote villains I like to see in the game where they're just kind of like people where you're like, oh man, I can't believe they're doing this, but they just did that. So I keep up the entertainment this week. I'll say that.
Oh yeah, no, you're not going to get any disagreement about the entertainment. I mean, I had so many TikToks just on Hisam, that I couldn't even get them all posted. It was ridiculous. Just the way he behaved, and it's just amazing to me that someone acts like this and thinks it's okay in a game. Like, at one point he chuckled in the diary room and he's like, well, that's how you win the game, right? It's like, no, it's not.
It's not with our rules. Really
no. Now, I mean, let's be honest. We could go on all day about how poorly he played his HOH, but I have a feeling we'll be spending a whole podcast dedicated to him very soon. And he will come up in the rules, of course, too. But I want to briefly talk about someone I enjoy watching for other reasons. Nicole, or Mimi, as she has been known. We've only seen her briefly on the show, but even then, she has been the voice of reason and annoyance, which is funny. And on the live feeds, even more. She didn't want to flip and vote out Cameron just because of Hisam, but she also saw that her alliance did want to do it, and she was smart enough not to cause a fight about it. In the same vein, she ranted to herself in the storage room about how it doesn't matter what Hisam said. He could insult her family, and that wouldn't change how she plays the game. So she's doing all the right things, saying the right things, and giving us entertainment.
She is. It's been fun watching her work, and I wish there was a little bit more spotlight on her on the episodes so people could see it. I wish my only complaint with the episodes was the way they're edited is that it's hard to tell because it's going live, right? You can only narrate a story so much when you don't know what's going to happen next. But I do wish we saw an insight of players before they're in danger or part of the integral storyline about what they're doing, how they're feeling. So that way, when that moment ultimately comes, there's so much foreshadowing or lead up to it. And I think for Nicole, we're kind of missing a lot of that on the real episodes of how entertaining and interesting she really is when she thinks these things out loud.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned how she was ranting privately in the storage room, and that's not the first time she's done it. I love it. She wanders around and she just rants, and it is hysterical. And she's playing nice openly, and then in private, she's telling us what she thinks, which is exactly what a player should do. Keep it all. I mean, literally, if you when we get to the poster, the Survivor poster. Literally, if you look at it right there, rule 5 is to keep pretend to be nice. And it's a picture of, in that case, Boston Rob, but it's someone talking crap to the camera. So it's not talking it to the faces of the people, it's talking it to the camera. And that's exactly what she is doing here. And that's why rule 5 is the same in Big Brother as it is on Survivor. She's telling us what she thinks, and people who only watch the show are missing that, because I've seen lots of comments like, oh, Nicole's not doing anything. It's like, no, she is playing the game You just don't see it because they're not showing it.
100% agree. And I think I would be remiss to not mention this because between our preview week, our week one, our comments are doubling on people saying we need a Big Brother poster, David. Okay. I'm seeing in mass people are asking us, give us the rules Big Brother poster version.
Okay.
So,
we'll have to see. I mean, it was an undertaking, so we'll have to see.
Well, yeah. So
Maybe,
double the comments again this time.
Yeah.
And tell David how much we need a Big Brother Why Blank Lost rules poster because I want to make this happen. I need your help to make this happen. Okay, so we got to convince David and the whole RHAP crew on this.
Well, remember that one that was made by Eric.
That was Eric, yeah.
You know, and he's a Survivor guy.
I think we can talk to him. I think we can convince him. He can.
Well, it was a special project for him, so that was a whole different thing. But, so we'll see. We'll see what we can do. But is there anything else you want to discuss about the players before we get to our next regular segment?
Let's see. I think I'm excited for our regular segment because I'm interested to hear what you have to say.
I don't know if excited is the right word, but yeah, normally our next segment would be Julie Chen Moonves is wrong about blank. Except, believe it or not, I don't have anything for her here this week, mostly because she just didn't say much. I think that she shut down a number of her interviews, or production shut down a number of her interviews after the whole Luke situation. So she had her like 3 or 4 questions from Dalton Ross, and they were, I mean, even she didn't screw those up. But we do have Big Brother production was wrong about blank. And of course, this relates to their idiotic idea of having an audio-based veto competition with Matt. Now, a lot has already been said on this. I don't want to duplicate all of that. But to me, it wasn't just the crime of doing it, but as it so often is, it was the attempted cover-up. Because out of the blue, they basically gave Entertainment Weekly a press release to publish as an article just before the competition. Oh, what interesting timing. And then they suddenly decided, the Scrambleverse suddenly decided to only show the top 3 times rather than the whole list, which couldn't possibly be because they didn't want to show how bad Matt's time actually was. They shut down the feeds for 19 hours, and then they continued to interrupt whenever anyone mentioned anything about how Matt was upset or anything that would lead us to see how stupid and unfair it was to have an audio competition with a deaf house guest. And the thing is, it wasn't even that it's just an audio competition. It was a scrambled audio competition. Like someone said, hey, I have an idea. Let's make it even worse for him.
It's incredibly frustrating. And here's the thing is that I think in a lot of these situations, and I try to look at what people are saying within the community to the deaf community, that there's some frustration sometimes when people feign like outrage over something when a player or somebody who's being impacted by these disadvantages doesn't really think of it as a disadvantage. They're like working through it. They're going through it. But in this case, we're seeing Matt also within the house and live feeds being distraught about these situations where he feels like, hey, like, how can I what can I do? Because it feels like it's stacked against me in these situations when you have a competition really based around something that he is just at a disadvantage of. And it's just not a fair playing field. And so it feels like the show and episodes and the live feeds are trying to cover that up in different ways because it doesn't seem like it was well thought out whatsoever. And that's frustrating, is that if you put somebody on this show, you have to think it out, not just through your premiere day, but all 100 days of how are you going to lay out the challenges for them to make sure it is a fair playing field. Otherwise, why incorporate these type of things and try to bring yourself up and say, we are as inclusive as we are when you aren't?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, this was a brand new competition. They haven't had anything like it before. So how about not having it when Matt is playing? You know, I mean, it's just, I think that their planning for this was, let's hope Matt doesn't get drawn for it. And I know that they claimed to have done a bunch of stuff in that article, but it was BS. I'm sorry. Even if they did those things, Even if they said, well, we want to see which voice he can hear the best. That still doesn't translate to this competition.
No, it doesn't. Sorry, go on.
No, I just still
Yeah, no, it's incredibly frustrating. I think also it creates a different dynamic too when even the other house guests are saying this doesn't feel fair. You know, it's like when your own main competition to win 750K, right, is saying, "Oh, I don't like that somebody who's in the way of me winning this amount of money is truly at such a disadvantage." Like that's when you know it's getting to the point where this is just truly there because in some cases somebody be like, "Oh, I'm glad I have an advantage to be able to beat it." None of the house guests feel this way. All of them are really relaying that I don't like how this is working out.
Yeah, even in things that weren't competition. Like when Jared was stuck in the whatever nether region and he came on the screen, the sound quality was horrible. Matt couldn't hear, and all the house guests on the live feeds are like, "Big brother, turn it up, turn it up." Matt couldn't hear any of it. They basically eventually they showed him the other house guests where a speaker was so he could be right up against it. It's like, and this and there's production out there saying, "Oh no, we did all these things to make it easier for him," and you couldn't do that simple thing.
It's a lack of preparation, and that's the reality of it. Is that you can now, while they're in the house, try to do as many accommodations as you can. But if you don't prepare beforehand on this stuff, that is a fault of yourself.
Prepare appropriately. They apparently did some preparation, but clearly not for everything. And it's and then after all that, the official Big Brother Twitter account posted about the veto comp after it happened and used a GIF of Matt. How dumb do you have to be to do that? And of course, when many people, including myself, noted that and responded and said, how dumb are you to do this? The tweet was deleted. And probably some social media intern got fired.
No, here's the thing: is I want to say that there's probably a solid team of people behind these posts, and that's the reality. Like with these type of companies, with CBS, you have professionals that have to go through these type of things who've been doing this for a long time, and also a lot of these posts are going to have to get approved, whatnot. So I wish it was as simple as just an intern putting that, but that would make it less egregious. It would mean that there's less thought behind it, but there's some thought behind this, and that's the thing is I don't want to rag on the whole entire media team because a lot of these people probably are just given what they need to put out there, but it's just so frustrating. And ultimately, anybody who's been watching these last episodes know that, or of our episodes, that Matt is my winner pick, but it's just a player as a person. I just want him to have a good experience in the show and feel like he was able to do, the things were appropriate, a fair level field as much as they can be for him to play the game. Because right now I just feel like it's frustrating for him to feel like he's trying to play a game where it's against him, and then leading into, our next conversation about his closest ally being gone. So it's even a harder situation now.
Right. Now, before we get to that conversation, I do want to mention, and I already showed this, but I showed the hard copy version. You can get the poster of the Survivor version of the rules in a shorter and much more colorful version in poster form. Go to robhaswebsite.com/YXLostFeed, scroll down to the poster, click on it. In addition, you can get that poster on a t-shirt, or you can get the Survivor Why Blank Lost rules as a checklist. You can also get, if you click on either of the t-shirts and search around, you can also get the honesty, loyalty, integrity shirt that I'm wearing that I hope to create. And by the way, on the back, it says scheme and plot, because that's what you should be doing behind your back. But it's not something that Hisam was doing. He was just doing the front.
Scheme in front of you. Tell you everything about your plan, your 5-year plan.
Yes. So Reilly was the first HOH in a situation where she should have been able to consolidate power and make positive relationships. But she ended up going from the penthouse to the outhouse, or I guess out of the house. All through the week, debates raged about whether the others should keep Reilly or not. The funny thing is, the vast majority of those debates had very little to do with Reilly herself and a lot more to do with Hisam. What should she have done to make the decision about herself? Where did she go wrong to begin with? It's time to figure out why Reilly lost. Now, the first and most important rule is, of course, to scheme and plot. And as the first HOH, Reilly was in a perfect spot to do it from the start. She had a final two deal with JAG by night 2. She was one of the main instigators of the Handful Alliance. And, meanwhile, she was also the HOH in a spot, as I just mentioned, where she didn't even have to nominate anyone, just save 2 nominees. And House opinion on who should go came together so quickly. She didn't even have to do a lot in that regard. She could have spent almost all week making good relationships and setting herself up for the long term. But instead, she spent most of her time with her alliance, talked about future targets for no reason in a way that we'll get to in the second rule, and assumed that those she saved would automatically be indebted to her. She even went so far as to tell several people that Cirie and Felicia would do whatever she, Jag, or Jared wanted. Well, I mean, maybe they'd do what Jared wanted, but she sure didn't know that. And, the gall of thinking that Cirie effing Fields would do whatever Reilly said. Please.
I think it comes to play very much so. And we saw it in this week and last week that the advantage, and that's what I'm calling, I'm not going to even call it twist, advantage of Cirie and Jared being in there together and having that relationship, that bond right there is so advantageous to their game and disadvantageous to anybody else in there, because every player, including Reilly, is operating on the understanding that, hey, these are 2 separate individuals, so my relationship between them will stay between each of them exclusively and not be intertwined. Of course, there's like alliances and whatnot, but not to the level of mother and son. So my take with Reilly too is week 1, and we're going to discuss it, dug her own hole in a lot of ways. But week 2, I was honestly impressed with her fight in a lot of ways.
Ooh, we're going to have some disagreement.
I know we're going to have some disagreement. And I think a lot of it was kind of out of her control week 2, even though there's some autonomy there, but week 1 really set up there.
Yeah. Yeah. As I mentioned, she did some poor maneuvering that we'll get to in the second rule. But of course, as a result of that, she found herself nominated by Hisam. Now, this is where the disagreement comes in, because you're saying she put up a lot of fight. I don't think she did. I think that she should have been sparked into fighting for herself. But she didn't even really defend herself when he asked if she'd mentioned his name. She was just like, yeah, I did. And when they asked her about that on the Winner's Circle podcast interview, she said, well, she's honest and a terrible liar, and she knew that going in she'd struggle with it. And yeah, I have to agree with all of that.
No, to that point, I think she felt Hisam was a lost cause in a sense. She knew he was going to come at her even more so. So I think in her mind was that if she would, she thought it'd be better for her to take up the saying like, yes, I said this, versus try to lie about it and then Hisam use that and come right at her. I think she knew there was no point of trying to convince Hisam one way or the other, and felt that she had some loyal allies. And this is where the issue that first week comes into play, right? That she thought she had some loyal allies, which she did, but she thought it extended to that Cirie, Izzy, Jared coalition, which she didn't know Jared was part of that coalition. Yeah. But the truly, the scheming part of this rule 1, where we truly see that scheme and plot, we found her scheming and plotting. The issue was, and I don't want to move too much into rule 2, was that it's never a good idea, and Hisam is honestly a victim of that too. Never a good idea to start talking about your next target before your target this week is gone, because you don't have power next week.
Right. And yeah, I mean, so there was this week, and I could see what you're saying about, she thought Hisam was a lost cause. But the thing is, there is no such thing as a lost cause in Big Brother. Argue with him. Maybe you could have, he already made it abundantly clear that she was his target because she had said his name. So lie, say I didn't. defend yourself. Try something. But she didn't. She just kind of went, yeah, I did. And then that was it. There was nothing more she could do there. But then as the week went on, there was, of course, the significant debate and discussion about whether to vote out Reilly or Cameron. But it was led by other people.
Mm-hmm.
Her allies did some of the work, but most of it was done by Suri and her alliance. And they did manage to flip the vote in favor of Reilly. But again, that was a shot at Hisam and had very little to do with Reilly herself. And because of that, it made it simple to flip the vote back the other way. Because again, it really had very little to do with her. And yes, she did have conversations, but she really didn't fight for herself in earnest until Wednesday night, after she was told repeatedly by different people that she needed to do it. And I mean, even Bowie, the invisible woman, told her that she needed to advocate for herself. But again, she focused mostly on Hisam and his speech more than why they should keep her rather than Cameron. And, she said she didn't want to campaign against Cameron, but like it or not, that's who she was up against. And, on the live feeds, Jared told Jag, when Jag mentioned this, Jared said, I'd campaign against Mama Felicia if I needed to. I mean, and Jared's right. He said he'd be mad at himself if he went home and didn't at least try to save himself.
No, that's valid too. I think there's a lot of buyer's remorse, or not buyer's remorse, the opposite, when you don't try at the end and then it comes to blow up in your face. I think the major issue, and this is something I kind of want to talk about too in the scheme plot, I think it's important that when we talk about Reilly, we talk about Cameron too in the same aspect. There was kind of an impact where, call it the dead horse impact, where Cameron truly, they talked about him so much, it was basically kicking up a dead horse, that they realized there's no point at one point. There's no strategic point of getting Cameron out now. There's not much Cameron can do against us while Reilly has these allies. So what we saw was week one, she had his level of autonomy and unfortunately had the HOHitis where it kind of spread and she tried to control so many things. But at the same time, she didn't control anything because she let everyone else make the decision. So it was she was kind of the bad of both worlds in that thing. And then coming into week two, she has no autonomy now. So she has to rely on the allies she had made from week one to do her thing. And so that's why I felt like she had no autonomy to make those moves. I was hoping her core four would help, but then Cameron being the dead horse, there's no strategic way to be like, let's take out Cameron over Reilly when you think about it.
I mean, well, you say she had to rely on her. She didn't have to. She should have been out there advocating for herself. This is why I am good to keep. And, mostly what she did was she gave a canned speech to everyone. I will protect you. I will protect you. She even said in one of her interviews, well, I was honest when I said that I would protect these people. Yeah, you can't protect everyone. And this kind of takes us into the second rule here, which says not to scheme and plot too much and to keep your scheming secret. And I mean, there's a couple of different things going on here. One of them is, what we were talking about. And the other, of course, the major issue is, well, that Reilly had said aloud that Hisam would be a target in the future. And, let me put off the first part here because, we know that her naming Hisam was a major issue. Because Hisam repeated it over and over and over again. I mean, like, dude, we get it. But that was indeed the primary reason that he went after her. And, last week I said I thought Reilly made the best choices possible in terms of who to take down from nominations, who to leave as a pawn, who to target. But it was all the other discussions she had that were all over the place that could have put her in future danger. Lo and behold, her naming Hisam was one of those other discussions. You just said it. She didn't need to put his name out there, not even to her own alliance. And, we discussed last week when Suri gave Kirsten a lesson. You don't really know who everyone in the group is loyal to in the early goings, and sometimes even later. So naming a name for some hypothetical future target, unnecessary, and can lead to this.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that week one, truly, she so overplayed her hand. And I think it's kind of funny because I think that's where our disagreement kind of happens is that I feel like week one, we agree on the week one where she definitely playing. Week two, I thought for me, I thought it was a good player for her. And keep in mind, it's to mute because the results show it.
Right.
But I think week two, I was thinking it might be best for her not to overplay too much and advocate as much because when compared to Cameron, she needs to lessen her threat level as much as possible, play up that Hisam's kind of the villain, and two, that Cameron is his villain part. Like strategically, I don't think there was any way she could have attacked when I was thinking in the mode to say that Cameron's a better person for her to go home strategically because she had to play a part like we need to attack Hisam. And so I feel like it was so teetering with Siri and Jared and them about trying to get her to stay, actually. They almost worked in her favor that she didn't overplay this last week. Of course, the results show that by week Wednesday, they're like, no, you got to advocate for yourself a little bit more. So I think, oh, sorry, go on.
There were things she could have done. She could have handled it differently because she continued her problem of having the obvious alliances. And that's, she had, everybody knew about her alliance that she had made, that she had been a part of. I won't say she had made, that formed. But it continued even as she was trying to stick around because when she was talking to the people on the other side, trying to convince them to keep her, she kept bringing up her allies and trying to get them added to any plan. Like she wasn't just saying, I will join you. She was saying, I will join you and I will bring along Jag and Matt and Blue and, whatever. And at one point, Tuesday night, she was talking to Matt and she couldn't understand why the other side wouldn't want to keep her when she had all these numbers with her. Yeah, that's exactly the point. You can't literally merge both alliances because that was what set Nicole to ranting in the storage room last week. If everybody's in one alliance, who are you going to vote out?
No, it's very valid. And I think the funniest thing, like what we talked about earlier, Nicole's right, and she summed it up very well, where she's very frustrated at Hisam. She would love Hisam to go home, but it truly makes no sense for Reilly to be over here when she has all these people and allies. And I talked about it earlier in the week that I felt this week was such an interesting week that it almost became not about Reilly at all. It became about the alternative players of do we attack Hisam or not? Do we go against HOH? And this flip-flopping, I think, is going to, unfortunately, I think this week alone of decisions made around Reilly will impact the game far more than Reilly's own impact on the game these first 2 weeks. Because what we're going to see is that all the other players are playing the game this week, and what we see the result was, it wasn't for her favor, but she played a low-key game this week, maybe too low-key, obviously, versus the other players played, and that's going to have some detrimental effects, which I think goes into, we both agree that she overplayed herself. Do you feel that Rule 3, was she flexible, though?
Oh, I'm not done with Rule 2. Don't.
Oh, you're not? Okay.
I got
carry on.
Yeah. I mean, like going back to what, her opening her mouth about Hisam. I just wanted to mention, Mike Bloom asked her about this in the parade interview, and she said, one thing about me is I'm very vocal in my emotions and my feelings. Sometimes I wish I could just zip it, but I think that's the one thing I would regret. Yeah, you can't be in Big Brother and be open like that, Now, getting back to the Hisam of it all, do I think Reilly was really a threat to Hisam? No. But I don't think he has exactly shown a great ability to think in flexible terms within the game. So she said his name, that's it. I'm sure we'll get to that soon enough. But the other thing is that Hisam also blamed Reilly for splitting the house on day 2 and taking away everybody's choice. This is preposterous on many levels. And she said on the Winner's Circle podcast, I can't tell 17 people what to think. And Cody said in response, why didn't you say that to Hisam? Why didn't you point that out? That was Cody on the podcast. Corey in the game said that the way she was viewed for it was like everyone makes an alliance, but for some reason hers was the bad guy alliance. And of course, the reason was Hisam. And it felt like Hisam was personally insulted to have not been included. He talked about how he wanted to play with the other strong competitors. And so what was kind of left unsaid, but hinted at, was look at me stuck with the older people. And earlier in the season, he had talked about, yay, I want to show that the older people can do it. But meanwhile, he's there, I wanted to play with the strong people. But he blamed Reilly for this. Like, you couldn't go and talk to people on your own and make this. Yeah. But again, Hisam being who he was didn't negate her mentioning his name. And, this goes back to what I was saying. All of their alliance was obvious. It was so alliance that Felicia came in and said, we have to create something to counter this. And, that created the Bye Bye Bitches Alliance, which grew into the Professors Alliance. And, we all know alliances happen in the house. The real problem was just how obvious it was. And she even told Mike Bloom that was another thing she regretted, creating such a firm alliance so quickly. And specifically because it was an 8-person alliance. And she said, there is no way we're going about that in secrecy. And now she sees it, but she didn't in the game.
It's tough, especially to have an 8-person alliance to keep that secret from essentially the other 50% of the house, because each person's going to have their own sub alliance. And then when we have covert agents, twists and advantages in the game. One thing is funny, though, this is a little slightly off topic, but I think it's interesting the way you frame Hisam being upset about Reilly, because in another world, I really do think if Hisam framed it as, you know what, they underestimated me, and I want to show these young kids that the old guys, I'm not saying they're old, but in his terms, right, the old people are they're competitors too, and we're going to take out these kids one by one and frame it like that. I think we would have so many more people on his side about these things. I still think, and I like to, this is where I want to say is I think it's a form of strategy that we're seeing Hisam really try to nail into somebody and kind of villainify him, say like this stuff. And I think he was hoping that it would paint him more as like a victim that's taking charge of their destiny and narrative, and that Reilly's the big bad. I think unfortunately in this situation, it's very hard to paint Reilly as a big bad just of who she is. And then especially like her attributes of like being very honest and like, hey guys, this is like what it is. It didn't work. It wasn't the right
well, and also him being as just egotistical and self-righteous as he was, it's not going to work. You're never going to come off looking good in that situation.
This was the worst combination, I think, for HOH and House gets to be targeted for them to work in a way, because the way his attitude is and the way Reilly is as just people, it was just a bad matchup, I think, in this one.
Now, one final thing in the second rule here, which I think is mostly doesn't matter, but Reilly was also telling her allies that Cherie and Izzy were running things. And I think when she said that, the timing was such that it was mostly after the vote had flipped back against her. So it didn't matter, except she, of course, didn't realize it had flipped back against her yet. But it's indicative of her speaking without thinking through the implications. Blue even told her, you can't say stuff like that. And Reilly was like, but it's true. And Blue's like, yeah, we know it's true. That doesn't mean you say it out loud.
Yeah.
Which goes to a lot of what she said, I think. We know it's true. Don't say it out loud.
Don't say it out loud. Exactly. Which I think
that's like, I think I've told this story on the one of the podcasts before, when my older son was younger, much younger. He got in trouble because there was a substitute bus driver who did not know the proper route. And he was very young, grade schooler, and was trying to tell her which way to go. And she wouldn't listen to him. And so he called her stupid and obviously got in trouble. And so I said to him, look, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to say there aren't stupid people in the world. There are. Okay. But you can't go around calling them that. Think it, but don't say it. So apparently someone needed to, have a similar talk with Reilly about her strategies here.
No, 100%. I think what's interesting too, I think this is going to be a interesting point to look at in a season in whole to use within the debate of do you win first HOH or you don't win first HOH. Some
Yeah.
people, I know the meta has been win first HOH. You'll be able to handle that, go far. But we've been seeing in some recent situations that you might need to ask yourself, right? It's a very dependent thing. For you, is it best to win first HOH, depending on how you are and you can take charge? Because with Reilly, if she doesn't win first HOH, I actually see her maneuvering herself a bit far because she's a good ally to have in ways. She's truthful. She's at your side. She's loyal. A lot of players want to utilize that. Unfortunately, when she went to power as the first HOH before anyone truly had power in the game, that's where we saw it go bad.
Yeah. And the thing is, that would require a lot of self-understanding.
Yeah.
Like knowing how am I going to handle this? And I would say so far, our two HOHs have not had a whole lot of understanding of how they performed or would perform in that way, or how they came off to other people for very different reasons. But I would say the first two did not have that. All right, now we can go where you wanted to go already, which was the third rule, which talks about the need to be flexible. And I think from the first two rules, we can pretty safely say this was not Reilly's strong point either. She had her friends / allies. They were pretty much one and the same. And she really just wanted to hang around with them. When pushed into it, she talked to the others. But as I said, her work in that regard, I found somewhat lackluster. And then on Tuesday, after it seemed like the house had flipped in her favor, Reilly was celebrating prematurely. She's like, yeah, all right, I'm going to win. And I'm thinking there, watching this on feeds and on Twitter, and I'm just like, oh, you should not be celebrating yet. And then she fell back to her routine of hanging out with her pals rather than solidifying bonds with the people she expected to save her. So, last week you talked about Kirsten having like a form with blanks on it. I feel like here, Reilly had a checklist. And so it was like, oh, vote flipped in my favor. Check. And then she moved on. And that was it. That was the final check of the week, and she was ready to spend the next few days just hanging around. But because she didn't reinforce those bonds, it made it very easy for Cherie and company to flip back and, as they said, take the path of least resistance by voting her out.
Exactly. And she was very limited. And here's the thing, and it's self-imposed limitations, right? When you make a huge alliance of 8 people and say you stick with as many people, there's only so many people you can kind of throw under the bus or have discussions about how you could better your game, right? How can I better your game, David, when I'm not going to target literally the other half of the house here? And so I'm only going to be able to target your alliance. So like you said, she came along with a package wherever she went with. She had that whole bundle deal. And sometimes, like, I don't want a bundle deal. And I'll put it anecdotal. Like, when the PS5 was coming out and no one could get it, and people were on third-party markets selling them, all the big, like, Sony execs and whatnot, and GameStop, they decided, you know what? So we can stop reselling. We're going to sell this as a bundle only. So that way, these scrapers, they can't just sell the PS5 itself. They have to buy not just the $500 PS5, but like extra controller, etc. So it was like $900 bundles. So that way, but no one wanted that. I didn't want to buy these random things. You just wanted the PS5. And I think this was the issue, like you kind of brought up, is that no one wanted the bundle of people. They might want Reilly by themselves, because they want to take out Jag next week. They want to take out Blue or some of these people because they see them as threats. Reilly maybe not much as a threat right now, but she's aligned with them. So her flexibility, it wasn't there in that nature.
Yeah. And so Mike Bloom asked her about this, about going back to her group. And she said that because she was feeling unsafe, she kept gravitating toward the people who made her feel comfortable, which goes back to what we were just talking about understanding yourself in the game. Like, I know, I'm sure you want to go to the people who make you feel comfortable, but you're in a game. You have to fight for yourself, not just be like, okay, they said I'm good, I'm going to go hang out with my buddies.
Exactly. And the person I actually feel the worst about in this situation, who is still playing a very good game, and I am having hopes with, and we had a little funny little Twitter interaction about them, but about America, is that
Hmm.
she consistently is trying to help these girls out when they're in these situations, from Kirsten last week to Reilly this week, and try to put little nodes of information and tell them maybe this is how you should do this A, B, and C, without
Hmm.
directly being like, this is exactly what you need to do and why you're going to go home if you don't do it. She's trying to help them out because she's seeing people who could be potential allies of herself go away one by one by one, and
Hmm.
unfortunately her block of people isn't as cemented as this other group of people. She can see that, and so I feel bad for her in that nature.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because Hisam, talked about, well, as soon as Reilly's gone, we can like remingle and maybe make alliances with different people. And the funny thing is, that's happening to some extent. America and Blue are making inroads in different
Mhm.
places, but it's not because of Hisam getting rid of Reilly. It's because of everyone wanting to get rid of Hisam that it's happening.
He's changing the whole game structure
Yeah.
without realizing it.
Yeah. So I do think we will start seeing more of America and Blue. I think those two have been kind of hiding themselves a little bit. And
Okay.
so it'll be interesting to watch those two. But in the meantime, we can go to the fourth rule, which says players should not let their emotions control them. Now, this is a bit of a hard one to judge for Reilly.
Hmm.
But I do think it's pretty clear that her original alliance was based on emotion because it was all her new friends. We just said she talked about how she went to who made them comfortable, made her comfortable. But I mean, and it does make sense to form an alliance with people who you get along with. Otherwise, you have like this Hisam situation of like, oh, the professors are like, oh, he's in our alliance, but we want him out. But you can't just leave it at that. You have to think past your own emotions to consider what the right moves are and also like how it will look to others.
Yeah, no, exactly. I feel like with Reilly, in this instance of emotions, we saw week one where she really tried to put her emotions aside and
Mm-hmm.
nominate and take down people she felt the house was there for. So I felt like she played a level head. Unfortunately, I think that maybe she didn't trust her instincts enough, knowing who she like should trust in the long run. Because I think Kirsten would have been a good ally for her to have this week potentially in this battle against Hisam. But also in this week, we just found herself really when she thought she was in the good, she got super excited. She was
Mm-hmm.
very, I don't want to say she let her emotions control her, but she didn't hide her emotions. And
Right.
I think
Right.
that's the thing. She didn't have a poker face when a lot of her friends and people in the house were saying, "Hey, don't show this completely."
Yeah. Yeah. I do want to say there was at least one time when her emotions definitely controlled her, and that was in terms of her not wanting to campaign against Cameron, as we
Mm.
discussed earlier. While we on the outside watching the live feeds, many of us felt kind of icky about the way he treated her, but she felt close to him. The thing is, as Jared, said to Jag, you can't let that stop you. And there was a scene separate from that, days earlier, where Suri was talking to Hisam about how they could be good people and comfort someone who was in a rough spot, which they were talking about Reilly at the time, actually. But that wouldn't mean they would suddenly align with them or absolve them of their prior mistakes. And, players need to be able to separate the two. I'm not sure that Reilly could.
I want to pose this question to you, okay? Because I'm
Okay.
interested. I saw then when Cameron first week, he tried to really play up this, and I feel weird saying it, but this dad daughter
Yeah.
relationship with Reilly and him, and everyone's like, "This is weird," understandably, but they're saying, "Why are you doing this? Like, it doesn't make any sense." But to his benefit, this week it really did play out because with them both being on the block, Reilly didn't want to campaign against him at all. And if
Mm-hmm.
anything, gave him a much easier way to not be evicted when some of the cards were against him. Do you feel in some shape or form that this was a strategical move by Cameron to, in one way, not knowing that they would be on the block together, but indoctrinate Reilly in a form that he always has an advantage over her?
I don't know. It's hard to say because we don't, we haven't gotten
Mm-hmm.
confessionals from him talking about it. And I don't think we ever will. I think at some point we'll find out what his thought was, but maybe not, because it just depends on, when he leaves and what the interviewers ask. I don't know. It is always a good strategic move to get yourself in good with someone.
Mm-hmm.
I think looking from the outside, it, like I said, looked icky the way he was getting in good with her,
Mm-hmm.
but
Obviously.
she clearly didn't see it that way, and still felt a solid friendship from him. So did it help? Maybe. It might have ended up helping, whether he intended it that way or
Mm-hmm.
not. I mean, the other thing is, if you're intending on making that relationship as a strategic move, why do you go and spill all the secrets to the other side about
That's
her?
true.
Because that's part of what got her nominated. It wasn't just Jared telling Suri that she had said the name. It was Cameron telling them. So yeah, it was. I don't know. I don't know what's going through his head.
We'll have to wait and see about that. Hopefully, somebody interviews will ask that question.
Yeah.
We'll send that over.
Yeah. All right. Well, we can move to the fifth rule, which says players need to pretend to be nice and play the social game. We've talked about this to some extent. Reilly obviously seems like a very nice person, maybe a little too nice. What do you think about her social game?
I think her social game was probably one of the stronger points of her entire game, if anything, where she was able to. There's a level of authenticity, right, that draws you to people, and I think she says what she thinks on her face, or says what she thinks in her mind straight up to you, and then she's honest. So I think that drew people to her. I think the unfortunate part was, it wasn't she needed to pretend to be nice because she's a nice person. She needed to pretend to be a little bit more cautious about saying certain things. I think that's the unfortunate thing, that I think she spilled all the beans, and in a house where, one, you can't trust people in the first place, but two, there's a twist advantage going on where somebody on your side is basically a covert agent for the other side. You're dead in the water right there. And then even your closest ally, Cameron, who was flexible, was throwing you under the bus.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I'm going to agree and disagree a little bit about her social game, because I think this is something we've seen and talked about before. The difference between being nice and friendly and turning that into an actual social game. As we discussed earlier, she spent most of her time with her group of friends, and that's great and all, but it didn't help, and as we discussed, actually hurt, when she needed people from the other side. She hadn't built up those kinds of social bonds, but suddenly she had to go begging for their support. And she'd even been told by others like Corey that she needed to bolster that part of her game, but she just didn't. It goes back to her just hanging out with her friends.
Yeah, no, I think you probably hit it on the nail right there, between being nice and the social game and making that different, the differential between them, because I think that is also important. I feel like other than that portion, though, it was really, she didn't play up her social game in a way to make those relationships. And I think the question is that I want to pose in this situation: do you think there's anything after the fact she threw Hisam, like said, Hisam is my target? Do you think socially she could have done anything with Hisam to repair that thing? Do you think he was looking for her to give another target, or he wanted her to lie about it? Do you think there's anything she could have done in that situation?
I don't know, because Hisam, and not to get to potentially next week's podcast, Hisam is, so inflexible that I don't know that she could have done anything with him. But again, he's the HOH. He didn't vote.
Yeah, that's true.
And so he was not who she should have been focusing on. She needed to focus on, Suri and Izzy and Jared and Felicia, and that, I mean, Jared, she thought she had anyway. But the other group is who she needed to focus on. But they saw that she just didn't have those connections with them. Yeah. And I think that they also saw eventually that as soon as, let's say they voted out Cameron. And then next week, they're all going to agree to go after Hisam.
Mhm.
As soon as she's back with her little group again, what's going to happen? Well, she said she was going to protect the others. Well, what does that mean exactly? And
Mhm.
let's say that Hisam, okay, they all agree they're going to target Hisam, and Hisam somehow wins veto. And now what? Well,
Mhm.
now what? It's going to be one of the people in their alliance. That's what. And she could say she's going to protect them all they want, but there's nobody else. So she needed to work on ingratiating herself with
Mhm.
that group, and she really didn't.
That's a good point. That's a really good point.
So, all right. Well, the sixth rule warns against being too much of a threat. And I think just about anyone looking at this from the outside would conclude Reilly didn't have much of a problem here. And yet,
Mm.
Hisam determined that she was the biggest threat in the whole game because she said his name. Now, obviously, don't get me wrong. It's true that if you find out someone is targeting you should target them first. But this was not some deep, devious plan of hers. She talked about it in the very first week of the game before people really got to know each other. She just threw it out there, but he took it as some, stab in his back and that he had to get vengeance for.
You know what? I think I kind of disagree with you actually on this one because I agree to an extent that I do think that was probably Heisen, but I do think this is probably one of the places where she didn't do good in her game or she was too
Mm-hmm.
much of a threat. I think if we look at the this beginning game, right? She's the only player outside of Heisen who's won a competition. She has the ability to, she has the whole bundle of people
Right.
behind her. When you compare her between her and Cameron on the block, Cameron's a dead dog walking, he's a dead horse. There's what can he truly do in this game at this point
True.
without winning, right? That he's one of those people that you can just come for him later. There's nothing there. Even his own allies are meh about him. But Reilly is kind of the glue there. I think whether it was intentional or not, Hisam made the best decision of who to get out of the house because Reilly was probably the main threat for him on that other side that would corral people against him. But I also think, and this is where I really disagreed, where I love the entertainment part of the flip-flopping things, and I love it when the house does a smart, has this fun. I don't want smart players all the time in the game because I want them to make chaos because that's fun for us to watch. If everyone does the same steamroll, it's not fun. But in this situation, I thought it was a horrible move for Suri, and I might get the pitchforks on me, but Suri in that group to try to do this flip flop against Reilly. If anything, I think it was just they were seeing Hisam and got a little blinded and wanted to make a move, but only week 2 against him when it's not necessary. Because if Reilly's in the house, the whole game is shifting back. But now, with hopefully if it doesn't come out that Heist they all flip flopped on Hisam, Reilly's gone. They can continuously steamroll and take out this youngins in the house, and that's what they should be aiming to do. They should make sure Hisam take him out before jury phase, probably. And I don't want to go into too much of predictions because, as they talked about, he probably is honest integrity. If you backstab him, he's not voting for you, so you want to get him before jury. But right now, it's the best time to take out Reilly, take out Jag, take out all these other young individuals who could pose a threat against you guys.
Yeah, I mean, so okay, there's a lot there.
I put a lot there, yeah.
Yeah, so as far as her being a threat, yes, she did win HOH. Half the people were throwing that. That was the comp. That was the only comp she won.
Yeah.
I mean, there weren't, obviously Hisam won all the rest. As far as her strategic threat level, I mean, we just spent, almost an hour now talking about, she didn't have much of a strategic threat level. She looked like she did. And that's where I, circle back to what you said. Yes, she definitely looked like she had all these people, but all those people couldn't save her. It wasn't enough for a majority. So what's the difference? And I think that when the house flipped, one reason was Suri's side thought we can use her to target Hisam. We need her and her friends to target Hisam because they had this idea that Hisam had his hooks in other people. But then it dawned on them that they didn't need her for that. What you just said, they really don't need her for that because everybody wanted him gone. And it appears and has been said that one look from Cameron to Siri and Izzy, changed the flip because they realized that he was upset at Hisam too. And I mean, I suppose one look could have sparked it, but it's clear they were already teetering on the edge there. If one look changed it, then they were, right on the borderline anyway. And others in the house and those of us watching from home had already been voicing the thought, like you just said, they could still go after Hisam once they took out Reilly. It would, if she were some huge comp beast that could always beat him, fine, but she wasn't. So it wasn't worth keeping her around for that purpose. So, yeah, I'll grant you she appeared to be a threat because she had all her allies that we talked about. But was she really a threat? No, I don't think so.
Okay.
All right.
And
go ahead.
Oh, no, I say granted. I think it'll be interesting to see how these next weeks play out. And I do think that it's a weird situation where she was like a threat in ways on paper, but she could have been against somebody else. It would have been, she wasn't enough of a threat to them to keep her on their side to attack the Hisam. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how this next week's play out. And I want to hear about predictions, but we still have,
seventh rule.
Seventh
rule. Trust almost nobody. Now, I think Reilly had this problem in a few ways. The most obvious is, we had talked about this, she presumed everyone in her alliance was actually in her alliance and remained loyal rather than, turning around and spilling to the other side. And again, we compared this to Kirsten also earlier. Reilly had both, as you called it, the twist of Jared passing it along to his mom, but she also had Cameron leaking information, and she talked a lot too, let's face it. At one point, Red even listed off her whole alliance to her, and she was shocked that he could know all of that. But it's not that hard when information flows from her side the way it does.
No, exactly. It's funny when you mentioned Red, I almost completely forgot about Red on the show because we haven't seen as much, which, if anything, is a good sign for him at the beginning of the week. No, she unfortunately trusted way too many people in this stuff. And I think the ironic thing is that when you're in HOH, it becomes almost a one-way road. You can kind of create it where you can get information to you, and you don't need to give all your information away. It's understood as an HOH that people have to pitch the information over to you, and you can kind of give like 50%, 60%. But for her, she made it a two-way street, which is great as an ally, but also week one when nothing is cemented in, that makes it very difficult because then now the information is all free form, and she is she's the mecca of information week one. All the information is going to her because everyone needs to tell her something because she's HOH. So she's going to now, if she spreads it all, it makes a chaos essentially. And we saw that she trusted everybody. Yeah.
She was telling all sorts of people, all sorts of things, even Suri, that she shouldn't have told her. And we mentioned earlier how Blue and others had to explain to her that you don't have to say everything you think out loud.
It surprised me too, because in one of the interviews they asked about whether she, and I think this may have been the Conspire Away podcast with Kat. She asked, did you know Suri? Did you understand? Like, did you know her back? She's like, yeah, I knew she was Survivor. So why did you trust? Well, she played Survivor, and she said she wasn't very good at Big Brother, so I just thought it might not translate. She's like, I'm a newbie like everyone else. So to me, I feel like I was very surprised that if you don't know who Suri is in her playstyle, that's one thing. That's like, but if you've watched her, you know anything about Survivor, Suri is truly one of the most biggest manipulators in Survivor history in a good way. People love it. The way she's able to conduct herself, create allies. That is what she's known for. She's not known as a compy. She's not known as the endurance queen. She is known for making sure that she gets troops under her and can manipulate her way through different things. And I mean that in a nice way. I don't mean that in a bad manipulation.
Right. And I mean, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, if you know that, if you've seen her, I just don't understand how then you could trust her.
And even if you don't know her, Suri talked about how she played 4 times.
Yeah.
Okay, you've got someone who played and was brought back 3 more times and brought to Big Brother. And you think she's just like a newbie. How can you believe that? I had some people saying that in like some comments to me. I don't remember if it was on Twitter or TikTok, like, oh, she's just a newbie too. And it's like, you're a fool if you believe that she is a newbie just because this strategic social game is played in a house instead of on an island.
It's a veteran. And I think if any Big Brother fans, whether they're saying it out loud or not, if they're going to put some surprise 17th house guest, in my head, if I see somebody a surprise or alum or whatnot, I'm thinking they have some secret behind. They have some form of advantage. There's something going on because the show is not. We know how the show is. They're not going to put somebody special in there and let them go away week one. So knowing where they come from, how they're doing, you got to red flags. Something has to blare in front of you.
I mean, there was already, they made her safe from initial nominations by making her the 17th house guest. She didn't have to go through those initial comps. You know, so there was already one measure of safety there. You know, as far as the debate, is it a twist? Is it fair? Izzy knew right away who she was and who Jared was. I and many others expected that Corey would too. And I'm shocked that he still hasn't caught on to it. If you have one or two people who know who they are, that could have put them in immediate danger. So yes, it's an advantage, and especially the way it played out, it could have ended up being a disadvantage. You know, if Izzy had, instead of going to Jared with that information, because she was a huge Cirie fan, if she would have gone to someone else and been like, that's her son, we need to separate those two, we need to get rid of them, that wouldn't have been such an advantage anymore.
I still think it's very slim that happens in any situation. I think most people, we can talk more about that later on and stuff like that. I feel like that we should save that for a Cirie and Jared episode whenever that happens, instead of delving too much, because we can go back and forth on that. But yeah, I think it's interesting to see how this advantage will play out as it goes forward.
Yeah. All right. Well, then it is time to wrap things up. So what are your final thoughts about Reilly?
You know what? I think Reilly is part of a Venn diagram we're starting to see first HOHs and then crumbling afterwards in recent seasons. I thought she was an interesting player. I think, you know, I always hate seeing like we have some young players go out early, but I do love that we have some older players who are really making an impact in this game. Reilly was honest. She was sweet, honest to a fault, I think. And we just saw the game strategy kind of fall apart as the game went by on. There's so many reasons that why she went home, but I think the main reason she did go home ultimately was that she didn't have a poker face and had loose lips. So because of all that, I believe that's why Reilly went home. Sad to see her go home, but interested how the game plays out.
Yeah, based off the little information we had before the season, I thought Reilly would play well and ranked her a 7 out of 10 for how I expected her to do in following the rules. I still think she's a very nice person, and it would have been fun to see more of her, but needless to say, she didn't play at a 7 level. She said her strategy was to be situationally aware and adapt to what was happening. But as we've just discussed, she really didn't do either of those things. Reilly had the opportunity to use the first HOH as a positive by gathering information, making allies, etc. Instead, she gave away information, created enemies, and spiraled. She put herself into a dangerous position by turning her HOH reign into a disadvantage. Did Hisam overreact to hearing that she said his name and that she had the nerve to not initially include him in her alliance? Yes. Did he go on and on about how she needed to learn accountability and own her choices? Yes. But most of her problems weren't really directly related to that. Rather, they occurred because she just didn't play for herself very well. This occurred both before her nomination, when she didn't consider that there might be moles in her alliance, even after information kept leaking, and after, when she let others do so much of the work and didn't really know how to lobby for herself. When the house did flip in her favor, it wasn't because of her, which meant that, as I've mentioned, there weren't compelling reasons from her to keep it that way, and the flip lasted less than a day. She tried to get the votes back, but it was too little, too late. On Sunday night, Corey was talking to us via the cameras when he was alone in a room by himself on live feeds, and he was rating the various players, including himself. And he said he really liked Reilly, but she's also not very good at Big Brother. And that is why Reilly lost.
Well put. Well put. week 2, we're already here.
Yep. So,
week 3, we're coming up hard.
Yeah. Before we continue into our predictions, I just want to remind everyone that, again, the Survivor version of the rules are available on poster and T-shirt form, as is the T-shirt I'm wearing, the Honesty, Loyalty, Integrity shirt. And you can go to robhaswebsite.com/yxlostfeed. Now, for predictions. As we discussed last week, as of right now, we will not reveal who won the HOH competition after the Thursday night eviction show. That may change next week. We're going to consider this because it seems like they're doing this every week now. But once again, to make sure nobody tried to read into what I say, I wrote up my predictions Thursday night while the feeds were still down before we knew. But really, this one is pretty straightforward. Everyone wants Hisam out. They plan to backdoor him. And Hisam can't play for HOH. So his only hope is that he either suddenly charms everyone or he gets picked for the veto comp and wins it. I guess something crazy could happen in the house, which is possible if someone else pisses off the HOH or the rest of the house and they pull something like what you were talking about with Cameron this week. Oh, well, we can always get Hisam later. But, being the comp beast that he's already shown himself to be, that's going to be more difficult for him. If he does not get picked for and win veto, I just don't see him getting out of it. And I really do think Hisam will be just like Reilly and go from the penthouse to out of the house.
I am going to go against the grain on this one because I feel like I don't think Hisam is going to go home this week. And even though I think it'd be fun, I think they're going to weigh the pros and cons and realize that, yes, he is he's a threat right now, but he's our threat. And I don't think he's going to attack Sari, Izzy, or Jared. Or Felicia. So I think between that knowledge, I think the people who should be worried is, I think I was worried about Jag last week. I think Jag should be worried this week. And I think we're going to see some form of Cameron on the block going forward. I think Cameron's going to be our pawn. If he doesn't win, he's going to be the person up there. And we can continue to see that. I think Blue would be in trouble, but I think Jared is going to continuously keep her off the block because it seems like there's this weird flirtationship that is its own dynamic that I don't even want to go into, but I think he's going to try keeping her safe from his mom and Felicia. So the best unknowing combination Blue has made with them. So that was my thing. I think Hisam actually is going to actually get away from this, maybe not scot-free, and I might be eating my words, nomination time come, but I don't think it's the time to get Hisam out yet. I think we got another week or so.
So you're thinking it's Jag, did you say, or Cameron?
I think Jag and Cameron are going to be on the block, and if possible, they're going to take Jag out.
Okay.
Which I would hate to see.
Yeah, yeah. I'd much rather Jag stay in than Hisam. Although Hisam for entertainment purposes, you can't beat it. But in the meantime, I mentioned, of course, that we didn't discuss any spoilers here. But if you want to see what we think about anywhere else, we're all over social media, Ovi, aren't we?
We are. We are on many platforms of social media where we discuss Big Brother and other topics. On Twitter, I'm at the Obi Kabir. On Instagram, I'm at Obi Kabir. And on TikTok, I am at Basmati Boy. David is on many more platforms because he's all over the place on there, and you can track him down in many different ways. You can find him on all his various accounts through his Linktree, which is Linktree/David Bloomberg. Or you can find him on most text-based social medias like Twitter, Blue Sky, and it can be found as at David Bloomberg, just his first and last name put together. On video platforms like TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram is at David Bloomberg TV. I will say his TikTok is they're all entertaining, but his TikTok is very entertaining. You should check it out because there's some controversy in the comments on some of those, which I love. And then because Threads is connected to Instagram, he's also at David Bloomberg there as well.
David Bloomberg TV there.
At TV,
Yes,
David Bloomberg
yes.
TV.
See,
Thank you
it's
for that.
confusing. I know. Yeah, on TikTok, I've been posting 3 or sometimes 4 videos per day. TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. TikTok is the biggest of those. Most of it has been Big Brother. Some other, sometimes I'll post things from the live feed, so it's not just stuff from the show. And then there's, other stuff from like Claim to Fame, uh, the occasional Stars on Mars, maybe even a Challenge USA. You never know what you're going to get. But, well, okay, you do know. There's going to be a lot of Big Brother on there.
I just started watching Stars on Mars, and it's actually a good one. So David's coverage on that has helped. Those are fun shows. And as we wrap up, we want to encourage people to check out the RHAP Patreon program at Rob has a website .com/patron. Rob has so many patron-only podcasts for Big Brother that I've truly lost count of them all. So jump on board and support shows like ours and everything on the network by becoming a patron at Rob has a website .com/patron.
Yeah, and make sure you're subscribed to all of the RHAP podcasts by going to our YX Lost feed page, or subscribe directly to the RHAP Big Brother feed at robhasawebsite.com/Big Brother. You'll find, the ton of great content that you expect from RHAP, like the daily live feed updates, the Big Brother Stock Watch, the Roundtable, and more.
And we can't end this without thanking Scott St. Pierre and the whole RHAP and Reality TV wrap-ups behind the scenes team for all the work they do, editing and posting and everything else. We really appreciate everything they do to get our voices from our microphones to your ears. And more than anything, thank you to all the viewers out there. We appreciate your comments on here when we're going live. It really means a lot. So continuously let us know what you think of the episode, what we can do to make it better. And then what are your thoughts on you believe that Reilly went home for A, B, and C, or whatever reason that we might have not discussed? And what are your predictions for this coming week?
That's right. And of course, before we go, thank you, Ovi, for joining me once again this week as we tried to guess which way it was going to go. It was like, it's leaning this way. It's leaning that way. The roller coaster was there. And, one way or the other, next week is going to be an interesting one as well.
No boring weeks of Big Brother 25 yet. And I'm hoping we continue this for the next 99 days, give or take.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks again. Thanks again to everybody watching, and we will see everyone in a week. Bye.